Welcome everyone, I am Tock Custom, and on this video we're going to show you how to make one of these little zipper pouches with the zipper on top. This is a great beginner level project and it's very easy, so we're going to show you what you need to get started right now. So you'll need some kind of woven or non-stretchy fabric, so I've got a coffee print flannel with some brown denim here. We're going to use a 7-inch zipper, and this is our zipper foot for our sewing machine. If you don't know what that is, we'll get to that in a moment. Your favorite cutting tools and pins or clips. I prefer clips for this project, but either are fine. And it's good to have an iron for making this all look really flat. Get your coffee and your favorite sewing machine, and we're ready to go. All right, so the first thing we need to do is cut out our fabric. So I made this little pattern here with my dimensions, and I just made some little notes that say, you know, cut 2 panels of fabric, cut 2 lining. We're gonna use a 1/2-inch seam allowance. So first, I am going to fold my outside fabric in half, and then I'm just going to lay down my pattern here and cut this out with a ruler and a rotary cutter. If you need to trace this with chalk and cut it out with scissors, that's fine too. Okay, now we're just going to do the same thing with our lining fabric, which is this denim here. Perfect, so we have all of our panels cut out, and now we just need to take our zipper out. Okay, so here's the zipper we're going to use, and it's worth mentioning that this is a 7-inch zipper from the top of the pole to the stopper here. It's actually about 9 inches from tape to tape, but 7 inches is the opening area. All right, so now we're going to start pinning or clipping our fabrics. So what you need for right now is just one of your outside panels and one of your lining panels. Now our first step is to lay one of our lining panels down face up, so you should see the pretty side. If you're using a print, you should be able to see the design facing you right here. Then we're going to take our zipper, and I usually start with the pull on the left, and we're going to match up the top of the zipper tape with the top of that raw edge of lining fabric right there. Now you're going to take one of your outside panels, and we're going to flip this over so these are right sides together, and we're going to also match this raw edge of fabric up with the top of these other 2 pieces here. So now we have the lining, the zipper tape, and the outside panel all lined up on top, and the zipper should be between the 2. I'm going to use a few clips to clip all of those panels together. This looks perfect here, so again, if you don't have clips, you can use pins just fine too. Anyway, now we're going to take this over to the sewing machine and do our first stitch. Okay, so here we are at our machine, and the first thing we need to do is switch our standard presser foot with our zipper foot. So I'm going to take this off. Now, if you've never used a zipper foot, you can attach this on either the left or the right side depending on where the zipper is. So the first thing we have to figure out is which side is the zipper on. And when I load this in this way, I can feel the zipper teeth are on my left here. So we need to put the foot on so that it is clicking into the left side of the presser foot like that, so that we've got a little bit more room to work with here. Now when I look under here, I can see my brown denim lining, the zipper tape itself, and then we're going to put our outside panel on top of that. And I'm just going to load this in and put the foot down, and then I'm going to put the needle all the way through the fabric so it doesn't move. Now the zipper head is right here, and it can get kind of bulky, so you can feel free to grab the zipper head and pull it down about halfway, and then we can move it as we're sewing. All right, so we're going to start our stitch with a couple of stitches forward and then a back stitch. And then we're going to go just up to this first pin or clip here and take that out. All right, now again, I can feel the zipper teeth right here, and I kind of want the needle to be a little bit closer so that we get a really flush zipper. So I'm going to kind of work my way to get the stitches a little bit closer to the zipper teeth. All right, so I'm coming up to where the zipper head is now, so just so we don't have to sew around it, I'm going to grab it and put it all the way back up to where it started, and now we can sew through the rest of this seam without any problems. Now as we're getting to the end of this stitch here, I'm going to do a back stitch about 1/2 inch before the end, and then just sew right off the fabric. Okay, now you can pull out your fabrics and trim your thread, and we can take a look at how this is going to lay. Now, if I want to see how this turned out, I can open up our fabric and we can look at how the zipper and the lining are going to lay here. So that looks just fine like that, and on the inside, there is no raw edges because our lining is sewn to the bottom of the zipper tape. All right, so here we are back at the table, and this looks great, but I want this to look really flat and crisp here. So what I'm going to do is we're gonna lay down an ironing mat. And first I'm gonna clip some of these kind of loose threads away. And then I'm gonna kind of just turn this, I'm right-handed, so it'll be easier this way. And I'm gonna kind of pull both the lining and that top panel really tight so that it's laying as flat as possible. And then I'm just gonna take my iron, and while I'm holding the iron down with a little bit of weight, I'm gonna pull the other end of the zipper. And some zippers have plastic teeth, so make sure you don't iron right on the teeth or they might melt. Otherwise, I'm just ironing all those layers down so that it looks really nice and flat right here. And I want to look at the inside to make sure that the lining is flat too. So it was kind of pulling a little bit, so I'm going to iron it from this side now. Okay, so now that this is ironed, it looks much more polished, and I like how flat this is laying here. As an optional thing, you can top stitch along that seam right there with some kind of decorative colored thread if you want, and it'll keep it nice and flat, but we're just going to keep this simple and leave it just like that. All right, so now to do the other side, we're gonna do basically the same thing. So I'm gonna take one of my lining pieces, and we're gonna do this face up or right side up. Now this is exactly the same, except there's fabric attached to the zipper. So before we did this where the zipper head was on the left, and now we're going to line this up so it's on the right. So I'm just looking to match up the raw edge of the zipper tape with the top of our lining, just like we did before. Now I'm going to take our print outside fabric, and we're going to do the same thing where we flip it upside down. So now these are right sides together. Now we're just going to match up the raw edge of this outside panel with the zipper tape and the lining, just like we did before. And we're just going to clip all those layers together again. Now it should look something like this on the front, and then the back should look nice and clean like that. If I peel this up, nothing should be covering the zipper right there. So anyway, we're gonna take this over to the sewing machine and do a very similar stitch from here all the way down to the other side. All right, so we're back at the machine, and with some zipper projects, you have to alternate the position of the zipper foot, but in this case, we don't need to do that. When I load this up, I can feel the zipper teeth are still on the left, because we're sewing from the other side. And we're just gonna do the same thing. So I'm gonna line up our needle about 1/2 inch onto the fabric. And if I pull this back, I can see that the zipper head is on the other side. So I don't have to move anything right there. We can just start sewing right away. All right, so we did a back stitch, and then we're just gonna sew all the way down to the other side. All right, so I'm a couple inches from the edge, and I don't know if I need to do this, but I am gonna pull the zipper head down past where we sewed so we can finish this up nice and straight. I'm going to finish with a back stitch and sew off the fabric again. Okay, so now we can open this up once again and flip our lining. Oh, whoops, the zipper is still open. We're going to close the zipper and see how this looks. All right, so this all looks really good, but if I'm being honest, I really want the zipper tape to be right in the center between those two panels, so I'm going to be kind of a perfectionist and flip this back. So we're gonna do the stitch one more time, and I'm gonna get a little bit closer to the zipper teeth. Okay, let's see if that made a difference. All right, that looks much better. I'm very happy with that. So we've got all 4 of our panels sewn to the zipper, and now we get to turn it into a little pouch. All right, so we're back at the table, and I'm gonna clean up any threads again one more time, and then we're gonna do the same thing where I'm going to press this so it looks just like the other side. Now, if anyone watching this is brand new at sewing, the difference between good-looking projects and amazing-looking projects is pressing between every single stitch that you do, if you can. All right, excellent. So now, hopefully you have something that looks like this. And now we can start pinning this into place so that it takes the shape of our pouch. All right, so for doing this part, I actually prefer pins. So the first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna unzip the zipper about halfway or maybe a little bit more. And what we want to do is we're going to take our outside panels and we're going to just fold them together. And I'm going to pick this whole thing up and lay it flat. So now we've got our outside panels on top and our lining panels on the bottom. Now everything should be right sides together, and I'm going to match up our raw edges of corners. And I'm just going to put a single pin between all 4 of these corners. Now that we have the basics pinned in place, I'm just going to put a few more here just so the fabric doesn't move around. Okay, this next part is very important. So we need to make sure that we leave an opening in the lining so that we can turn the whole thing right side out like a pillowcase when we're done. So what I like to do is I'm gonna put some pins in the bottom edge of the lining here, and I always do a set of double pins, which tells me where to start or stop my seam. So anyway, we're gonna end up stitching this in a big rectangle starting here, and I'm gonna go that way, all the way around, and then I want to end about here. And that's gonna leave me with about a 3-inch opening that we can use to turn the whole thing right side out. Now there's one last thing that I like to do before I get ready to sew this. So I need 2 clips right here, and what I want to do is try to accomplish the zipper tape so that it folds this way and pinches that way rather than the other way around. Otherwise, you get kind of this weird looking seam on your zipper. And the way to do that is I'm going to open this up a little bit and look at the zipper tape. And I want to push this from the lining side and fold that down so the zipper tape is laying that way. Hopefully that makes sense. If you get it backwards, you'll know right when you finish. But anyway, that all lays really flat now, and I can put a clip that holds all that together that way. So again, going from the other side, and this will look a little different because we opened up the zipper, but I want the zipper to be pointing or pushing towards the outside fabric panels. And then we're gonna lay it flat, pinch it, and then put a clip there. If you don't have clips, you can just as easily try to manipulate the fabric before you sew through the machine. All right, so this looks perfect. We've got everything pinned and clipped into place. We're gonna start our stitch right here and go down to the corner, pivot, and go all the way across. If you follow a 1/2-inch seam allowance, you won't hit any of the zipper teeth or the zipper pull because it should be somewhere in the middle here. Then we're just gonna go and pivot at our corners, and then we're gonna end right here at this set of double pins. All right, so before we do this stitch, I'm going to take our zipper foot off since we don't need it anymore. And I'm gonna put our standard foot back on. Okay, so now we can load this into the machine, and I want to start my stitch right here on the lining. And again, we're gonna follow that 1/2-inch seam allowance. So I'm gonna take my pins out, and we're gonna start here with maybe a double back stitch just to make sure that stays nice and strong because we have to pull that lining inside out later. Okay, now we're just gonna sew into the first corner and stop about 1/2 inch from the edge. Make sure your needle is down. We're gonna lift the foot up and then pivot the whole fabric. Then put the foot back down and we're gonna keep sewing. All right, so we're coming up to where our zipper is. And I had already clipped this, so I know it's laying the correct way, but you wanna make sure that the zipper is laying towards the outside panels of fabric like it is there. So I'm gonna lay this as flat as I can, and I'm gonna go really slow just in case I hit any zipper teeth or anything. Okay, and that did fine. So now we're just gonna go to the next corner. And we're just gonna pivot and go all the way around until we get back to where the zipper is one more time. All right, so we're coming up on the zipper one more time. Everything is already laying the correct way. So I'm just gonna go real slow once again till we get all the way through, and we are almost done with this. So here is our last corner that we need to do a pivot, and then we're gonna go right up to the last set of double pins, which reminds me to stop right there. So I'm gonna pull these out, then we're gonna do another double back stitch here. So hopefully you end up with something that looks like that. All right, so let's go have a look at this and see how it turned out. Okay, so here is how mine looks so far. And once again, I'm gonna clean up any loose threads. Okay, so now before we turn this right side out, it's really important that we kind of trim the corners and maybe some of the fabric so it's a little less bulky on the inside. So I'm gonna take a pair of scissors here, and I'm going to first cut our corners, which is really gonna help us get some nice sharp pointed corners when we turn this right side out. All right, so when I cut my corners, I do it so it's maybe, you know, a 1/4 inch or so from the stitches to make sure that doesn't pull out. So now that I have my corners cut, I am gonna thin out the seams just a little bit. I don't have to do this, but I just want this to look as flat as possible. Now, if you are trimming your seams like I am, it's kind of important that you don't trim it where the opening is. So I'm just gonna leave mine just like that. All right, so now it's time for us to turn this right side out. So I'm gonna kind of reach into the opening here. And the first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna unzip the rest of the zipper so it's all the way open, and you won't be able to see this, but I'm just reaching with my fingers on the inside to grab all of this fabric, and we're just gonna pull all of it right out of that hole in the lining. All right, now I'm trying to get my points as flat as I can by just kind of rolling my finger and my thumb together to get the points nice and sharp. And it's usually pretty hard to do this by hand, so there's something called a point turner. So I'm gonna use this, or you can use a chopstick or a pencil or something to get in there, and I'm going to try to get these points really pointy. All right, so something like that looks really good. And if you don't trim the corners of your seam on the inside, it's really hard to get nice pointy corners like that. Okay, so before we do our last stitch, I am gonna press this, even though I really don't need to, but I just want this demo to look as good as it can look. So anyway, I'm just pressing the bottom where that opening was together because we're gonna end up sewing this shut on the machine. And it's okay if the stitches show a little bit because it'll be hidden on the inside. But since we got our corners nice and pointy on the outside panels, I am gonna iron that so that everything looks really polished. Okay, so we're gonna do our last stitch where we're gonna close our opening. So for me, it's right here to about right here. And if you pressed it, it should lay nice and flat, but if you want it to not move around, you can just put a couple of pins there so that that's not gonna go anywhere. All right, so I'm gonna take this to the machine and we're just gonna stitch from here to about here. If you really wanna hide the stitches, you can do this by hand, but in my opinion, you really don't need to. All right, so I'm sitting at my other machine because it's got black thread loaded in, which will be a little less noticeable. But anyway, we're just gonna do a pretty standard straight stitch. So I'm just gonna do a back stitch and stitch pretty close to the edge there, just as long as it's going through both ends of the lining. And when I get to the other side, I'll do another back stitch and we are done. All right, so here was our last stitch down here. Now I'm just gonna clean up any loose threads and we're gonna press this into shape. Now, all we need to do is just push this into itself. And I'm just gonna use my fingers to make sure the lining is filling up the corners. All right, so this thing is finished and we're gonna do one last quick little press here just to seal this up. All right, so we are all done. This looks excellent. I think the lining turned out very clean and the zipper does work. So if you're brand new at sewing, hopefully you learned lots of cool new techniques, including doing your first zipper. And here's some other examples of me just having fun with different fabrics and linings and different colored zippers. And don't forget, you can do vinyl and embroidery designs on these as well. All right, folks, so we are all done with our little zipper pouch, and hopefully you guys made your own and had some fun learning some new beginner techniques. Anyway, if you have any questions about this project or anything else, please let me know in the comments. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching, and we will see you in the next video.